Cinema Wellman. I'm your host, David, and the Director's Corner / Wes Anderson Lovefest episode has been moved to next month because I thought of something that I wanted to do that I now need to rewatch all 11 of his films again. And that's not much of a chore, so I'm looking forward to it. And the film schedule, the screening schedule's already been made up. Today, instead, you'll get just one more thing. First of a possible series of episodes that may pop up from time to time as needed. I say as needed because all I'm really going to do today is tell you stuff that I forgot to mention during previous episodes. Kind of like what Tony Reale did at the end of Pardon the Interruption back in the day as Stat Boy, where he told the hosts everything they got wrong or neglected to say during that episode. Now, I'll be my own Stat Boy today since Reale is busy. It doesn't happen every episode. But now and then I'll finish a show, and I'll kick myself because I forgot to mention something. I started keeping a list. Well, that's a shock. And when the list gets kind of long, I'll do just one more thing episode to fill in all the blanks. The title comes from a catchphrase of the best TV detective of all time, Columbo. Columbo, played by the great Peter Falk, appeared to be totally disorganized and scatterbrained, but he was far from either. Columbo would ask question after question, often exasperating the killer. He would have already figured out the crime from the start. And I love that show because as the audience, you got to see the killer commit the crime. And then the fun was watching Columbo figure it out. But he always needed proof, which was usually provided by the murderer themselves. When it seemed like he was done with his questioning, he'd begin to walk away and then turn around like Earl Weaver and return saying, just one more thing. It was a brilliant show that always had the best bad guys. And the first episode ever was directed by none other than Steven Spielberg. There is always a movie connection to things here at Cinema Wellman. Before we get to what I missed in those previous episodes, I wanted to mention the passing of an actor who always entertained me and usually made me smile, unless he was playing someone really, really evil. The great Donald Sutherland left us this week at the age of 88. Sutherland's acting career spanned 6 decades, and he played all kinds of characters, regardless of your definition of that word. While younger people know Sutherland for his chilling portrayal of President Snow in the Hunger Games series, he began creating memorable characters in the 60s. Some of our favorites include Vernon L. Pinckney in The Dirty Dozen, Hawkeye Pierce in MASH, a very different Hawkeye Pierce than we saw portrayed by Alan Alda in the show. Sergeant Oddball in Kelly's Heroes. He plays a hippie during World War II. I never understood that, and I always loved it. He was John Clute in Clute, which is a great murder mystery that he co-stars with Jane Fonda. He played John Baxter in Don't Look Now, which is a great thriller with Julie Christie, who's phenomenal. Dave Jennings in National Lampoon's Animal House. He was the professor, and I used a line of his for years and years and years while I was teaching. The kids are all getting up and leaving, and he says, "Now I'm waiting for reports from some of you." And they're all like, "Yeah, whatever," and they're all leaving. And he says, "Listen, I'm not joking. This is my job." I said that all the time. The kids didn't understand it, but it made me laugh all the time. And of course, Sutherland was Matthew Bennell in The Invasion of the Body Snatchers with that famous point, or with that curly hair, I don't know. And yes, of course, President Snow. Donald Sutherland won a Primetime Emmy for Best Supporting Actor in a miniseries or a special for Citizen X, but he was never even nominated for an Oscar. He was given the old, "oh, we blew it" honorary Oscar, just like Edward G. Robinson, Peter O'Toole, Alfred Hitchcock, by the Academy to try to make up for all those times that they screwed things up. It doesn't make up for anything. Now, let's move on to those previous emissions from the earlier episodes, and thank you, Donald Sutherland, for decades of memorable and oddball characters. So here are the previous emissions. Apparently, this stuff is information that I thought you could not do without. Number one, something that was brought to my attention after our Once Is More Than Enough episode by my sister Vanessa is the possible inclusion of $1 Million Baby on that list of great films that one screening is enough because of the subject matter. I agree with V 100%. And if you haven't seen Million Dollar Baby, I won't spoil anything. But it won 4 Oscars. Best Picture, Director, Clint Eastwood, Best Actress, Hilary Swank, Best Supporting Actor, Morgan Freeman. And if they gave Oscars out for making you sob uncontrollably and have some of your soul ripped from you, it would have won a 5th Academy Award. Good call, Vanessa. Number 2, when Hannah and I did our Final Destination Please episode, we spoiled just about everything as we detailed our favorite deaths from the series. What we neglected to spoil was the fact that, and I'm spoiling it right now, is the fact that the end of the last movie is the beginning of the first movie. At the end of Final Destination 5, Sam and Molly get on Flight 180 and see Alex Browning and some of his classmates being removed from the plane. Well done, Final Destination. Number 3, while eviscerating Roadhouse, there's more Roadhouse trouble. During the worst section of our May screening episode, I think I neglected to mention that this new updated refresher, reboot, whatever you want to call it, actually used a tagline from Roadhouse 2. Not the tagline from the Patrick Swayze original, the tagline from the 2006 actioner Roadhouse 2 Last Call. The tagline, "Take it outside," which is interesting because technically the bar in that Jake Gyllenhaal dumpster fire is an outdoor bar. So there's another thing to hate about that movie. Number 4, in that same episode, we kind of loved The Fall Guy. Something we loved that we forgot to share is that the movie being made in The Fall Guy is titled Metal Storm. When I first saw this, I watched Fall Guy, for the first time, and they said Metal Storm, the first thing that made me laugh, because it reminded me of the title of a really terrible 80s sci-fi action movie titled Metal Storm, The Destruction of Jared Sin. That was definitely on the drive-in circuit in high school. I'm sure Andrew remembers it well. Although if it was the second film of the night, maybe not. Well, it turns out that it was no coincidence. The filmmakers of The Fall Guy purposely used that title. I guess if you're going to make a movie about a little-known TV show from the 80s, you may as well also name your movie within the movie after a little-known sci-fi movie from the 80s. I certainly appreciate it. Number 5, in last week's Friends of Cinema Wellman episode, we spoke about Edith Head and her brilliant career as a costume designer. I mentioned that she worked on both color and black and white films, but I forgot to mention that her trademark glasses, those blue tinted glasses, weren't tinted blue for fashion reasons. The glasses were tinted with a special blue tint that would make things appear to her black and white when you looked through them. So, if she was a costume designer on a black and white film, obviously everything's not in black and white. I once thought that as a kid. Didn't happen that way. Stuff's still in color. She could design the costumes for black and white productions and look through her glasses at her creations to see what they were going to look like on screen in black and white. How about that? I love that. Larry also sent some positive notes about that episode. Thank you, Larry. And mentioned that his dad once told him that Edith Head was an often used crossword clue because of the number of vowels and their versatility. I did not know that. And lastly, also from last week's episode, number 6. While speaking about Edward G. Robinson, I mentioned that casting him in the biblical epic The Ten Commandments, where's the Messiah now, which he didn't say, but he should have, was one of the worst casting choices ever. I should have added that John Wayne, playing a Roman centurion in The Greatest Story Ever Told, was even more preposterous. He has one line, and he delivers it in true John Wayne drawl. And I don't have a John Wayne impersonation, but his line is, "Truly this man was the Son of God." And just think about your worst John Wayne impression and him saying that. And picture him with a Roman helmet, the centurion helmet, and maybe a vest and chaps and a 6-gun. Because when you see John Wayne, that's all you see. Really cringy. And I also meant to add that Edward G. Robinson wasn't good enough to be nominated for an Oscar in the minds of the Academy, but he was good enough to be the inspiration for an animated frog villain on Courageous Cat and Minute Mouse. The interwebs will prove that. It's worth 20 minutes or a lot less of your time. The animation is dreadful, and Minute Mouse is so much like Mickey Mouse that I'm surprised they never got sued. Tune in, look that up on the YouTubes, Courageous Cat and Minute Mouse. I watched that as a kid and was delighted. Well, that is a wrap for the first of a possible who knows how many, just one more thing, episodes. I guess it depends on how much we forget to include in the future. We hope you're back with us next week when we break down the best and worst of the films we screened here in Cinema Wellman in the month of June. June is over already. The good news? We didn't watch Roadhouse. Until then, take care.